Welcome to Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. Each week, the NI Bullpen will be covering the world of comics, talking to creators, deep diving into some fantastic stories, and much more. Now let's hand it over to the team and turn a page.
Welcome to a very special edition of Nerd Initiative's Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. My name is Ken M. You know me as the host of the ODPH podcast. I'm also Nerd Initiative's editor-in-chief. To my left, your right, it is our head of wrestling at Nerd Initiative, the head of the 3FM podcast, but the horror aficionado at Nerd Initiative. And you know when you see him on screen, we have a fantastic book to talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the one and only Rich.
I always love dropping by the comics division now that I'm technically officially a member.
This is true.
Now I do write comic reviews, but any chance I get to talk some horror with some great creators, I'm always going to be here in this seat.
Absolutely. And we have a fantastic book for you to talk about because when this came across our wire, our entire bullpen was fighting to review this. This is no lie. This is actually a peek behind the curtain because everybody checked this out on Comixology Originals, and everybody has been buzzing about it at the Nerd Initiative bullpen, and rightfully so, because it is a fantastic horror book that has so many layers to it. I could rave about it, but we're fortunate enough to have the writer of this book on the line. You might know his work from such TV shows as Spartacus and Netflix Daredevil, but you also know him from the comic book world as from Wastelanders, Wolverine, and Conan, but you're definitely going to know him from the new book that just dropped called Beneath. Please give a warm welcome to the one and only STEVEN DeKnight. STEVEN, what's going on?
Hey, man, thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here talking about this book. It's my first graphic novel. And I grew up loving comics and loving graphic novels. And I've always, I've dipped my toe in to comics here and there, a one-shot, like you mentioned, the Conan, the Wastelanders thing. But I really wanted to get in there and tell a full story. And I was just thrilled that Comixology gave me the opportunity to do this book.
Oh, yeah, this was, like I say, this is a phenomenal first entry into like your original graphic novel. How did the whole story of Beneath come about?
I'll tell you, it goes back to Universal. I had a meeting with Universal years ago when they were trying to relaunch their Classic Monsters division that they've done several times. And this was, I think, about a year, maybe a year and a half before Invisible Man came out, which I absolutely loved. And I went in and had a meeting, and they said, hey, here's the catalog. Of course, I had seen all of the movies, even the obscure ones that I watched when I was a kid. And they said, see if anything interests you. There were a couple that are already taken, like Creature from the Black Lagoon and Frankenstein, of course. But I was more interested in, one of the more obscure titles, which was The Mole People, if you've ever seen that old movie, which was very much like Lost Horizons with creatures. And if anybody has ever seen that movie, it's set in the 1930s, classic story. I think it was a plane crash or a mountain expedition or something. Anyway, they come across this hidden society under the earth that's like a Shangri-La. And except they've got these mole people working as slaves. And, it's interesting because the movie has nothing to do with the mole people, except in the third act when they revolt and start killing everybody. Yeah. So I thought, hey, I could combine this with an idea I had many years ago to remake Them, the giant atomic ant movie. That's where the opening of the graphic novel comes from, because I had originally jotted down, hey, what if in Them it's undocumented immigrants crossing the border and they get sucked underground, and it turns out it's these giant ants, and that was going to be the start of the movie. So that was my jumping off point. And around the same time, as always in our country, there's an issue at the border because one political party doesn't want to do anything about it except complain about it. And it was, the for-profit detention centers were and still are a big issue. So I thought, there might be some way to combine all these elements into this mythology where and originally it was going to be the mole people, and then of course it changes in the graphic novel to something a little more deeper. And I thought this is a great way to put a social issue that I'm concerned about into the context of genre, which I always love when movies or books do that. And that's really was the genesis of the idea. And from there, I started thinking, I was originally thinking about it as a movie, so I wanted to make it contained and affordable. So that's where I had the idea of, well, what about an assault on Precinct 13 with creatures, where it's a facility, a for-profit detention facility that's closing down, skeleton crew, and the people get trapped in there with undocumented immigrants and the guards and a sheriff or a sheriff's deputy, and they have to survive until the sun comes out in the morning. So it was a very simple setup. And that also allowed me, because it's a simple story setup, to really concentrate on the characters and make sure they were fleshed out.
Amazing.
Absolutely. Obviously, coming across just talking to you, we know that you're a huge horror fan, and obviously, you gave if you're going to deep cut the mole people, I think that you know your stuff. But I was just going to ask you, what are some of your favorite horror stories, whether it be movies or actual books? Not just to give you inspiration, just overall in fandom.
Yeah. Oh man, that is a deep cut there. I'd always loved horror when I was a kid growing up. And I remember being a kid in the 70s. And, back in the 70s, they had these great movies of the week.
Mhm.
Most of them were on ABC, and they often did horror ones. That's when I first saw Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, the original one. And for everybody out there, if you've never seen the original Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, check it out. It fucking terrorized me as a kid. I think I slept with the lights on for 2 years after I saw that movie. And then there was one called Gargoyles. I want to say you can see it on Tubi now. So I always loved those when I was a kid. And then as I got a little older, I say older, I think I was 10 when I read my first adult novel, which was Salem's Lot by Stephen King. And my mother said, "You're way too young to read this." So I snuck it off the shelf and read it. And again, it just scared the shit out of me for many years. And I became a huge Stephen King fan. Um, so that was really my start in horror. And there are so many movies that are just absolutely fantastic in the horror genre. I obviously one of my favorites, I guess, called horror sci-fi, of course, is John Carpenter's The Thing,
Yeah.
which is just a masterpiece. And I'm always amazed. I saw it at the drive-in when I was a teenager, and I'm just always amazed that it was a failure when it came out. It's like the critics hated it, the audience didn't show up, and me as a teenager, I'm watching it thinking, "This is the best movie ever. This is fantastic." They really took the essence of the short story "Who Goes There," and we finally had the technology to actually do the shape-shifting thing. Unlike the really great black and white movie, The Thing from Another World, which I adore, but in that one, he's a giant carrot basically that doesn't shapeshift. So all of those things combined was just the absolute best. I just love horror movies. I love horror novels, comics, everything to do with horror.
Yeah, it's always such a great realm. I've always been a big fan as well. And obviously you can't get too much better than John Carpenter and Stephen
No.
King. So like if
Oh
you're drawing
man.
inspiration from that, it's always a home run.
Yeah. And I would say too, with your history of horror, we're seeing a renaissance of it right now. Like it's really kind of gone back into really the forefront of pop culture. What do you think really connects the audience to gravitate towards it?
Well, horror is it's so cathartic. I mean, people love being scared. I mean, that's why roller coasters work. It's just There's something primal about that fear. And the other thing with horror that I think, unlike like action movies or superhero movies, you can do horror on a very low budget.
Mhm.
So you're not beholden to a big budget. You can do it outside of the studio system. You get great things like It Follows, uh, not made by a big studio, and it was just fucking killer.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's a combination of those things. People like being scared. People like that kind of tension and release. And it's affordable. At least when you're talking about movies and TV. And it's also on a purely creator side, it is just so much fun to work on something that's horror. There's so many things you can do and so many avenues you can explore. It's just a real playground.
Absolutely. Going back to Beneath, there in the story, I think that is great that there's the layers, because on one end you have, the supernatural creature feature type, monsters, if you will, who are obviously, responsible for deaths and such. However, you have another evil in the movie that might, or in that, sorry, the movie, I'm talking about
It
movie
feels
guy.
like a movie. That's how
Yeah,
good it is.
in the book, where it's the guards, and of course, the quote unquote freedom fighters that you meet in the beginning,
Yeah.
which I always think is oxymoron, that they think they're freedom fighters. Another story for another day. uh Sometimes I think in horror you can have the greater evil being man himself. We've seen that throughout time, and I think in this
Yeah.
book that you did that. How important was it to you, though, to layer the story with those extra conflicts?
Oh, very important. I think that's what gives it its real world feel, and it makes it more complex, and it gives the story depth. When you have that sort of thing, and of course, it's the classic. The real monster is man.
Mhm.
You can't go wrong with that. And I wanted to explore that social situation where, on the one hand, you have these 3%er freedom fighters, kind of citizen vigilantes patrolling the border, like there really are,
Mhm.
who are racist, but also exploring that racism where, the main racist guy used to date the Mexican American deputy. And how does that work? How does the racist justify that? Well, he justifies it the way most do. Well, she's not like the other ones. And really exploring that, and exploring the different views on immigration and undocumented immigrants, where, in the book, one person, has a very firm, you don't belong in this country. It's not your country. We don't need you. Get out. And, the undocumented immigrant says, yeah, yeah, you don't need us unless you want us to pick your crops or clean your homes, and lists all the things that they actually do. And then you've got Deputy Jess Delgado, who is Mexican American, first generation, in the middle of that argument, telling both of them, shut the fuck up. We've got bigger problems here. So it was really a great delivery system to explore this idea of racism and immigration and the border, but put it into an entertaining horror story.
And it definitely works too, especially with the art from Michael Gaydos. Like when you presented this to him, what was the reaction? And when you started hashing out ideas, like how did it come to be the final product for the creatures?
Oh man, this book would not be what it is without Michael. I still can't believe he did this book. Quite frankly, I've been such a huge fan of Michael's since Alias with Brian Michael Bendis, not the TV show, but the Jessica
It
Jones.
just go to a series.
Yeah. Yeah. And that came about, my editor, amazing editor up in Canada, Alison O'Toole. She came onto the book, and I was talking to her about artists, and she says, "Oh well, let me see what I can do." And she called me up and said, what do you think about Michael Gaydos? And my reaction was, he's never going to do this book. Are you kidding me? uh, but turns out I think he wanted to do a horror book. He was available, and it worked out. And to me, that's when the project really took off. The way Michael and I work is basically, it's a lot of free reign. It's Michael Gaydos. So he would send me pages, and the great thing about Michael is he does his own art and his own colors. So that's also why the colors are so specific, and you'll see the colors kind of shift colors depending on where we are in the story.
Yeah.
And that was all Michael. That was not in the script. It was just a brilliant thing that he came up with. And then when we got to the creatures, the original creature design in like my little pitch when I was trying to get it done as a movie, there's just no way to translate that into the book, because in the original description, they have translucent skin. You can see the organs underneath, but just really impossible to do in the art level. So I basically said, yeah, Michael, come up with something. And so he came up with some designs, and we sent some notes back and forth, and that's where we ended up with the EHOS and the book.
And it works so good too. His coloring is just such a hidden element in this book that really just makes it something special, and not just anything that's ordinary for horror, because it just guides you as the reader, and you can kind of feel the mood and feel the tempos change. And especially as you're trying to build that up and build the tension till finally the big reveals and big payoffs, it's such a key factor in this. Like, it can't go understated enough. And the artwork is just phenomenal in this.
Yeah, he really killed it. I could not be happier with his art. Just amazing. Again, I pinch myself. I still can't believe that he did this book. It is just so beautiful and unique. His style, just incredible.
Yeah, I think there can't be enough said. I mean, once again, getting it tongue-tied earlier with a movie, it reads like a movie, it looks like a movie. So going back to the fact that you have a history in film and TV, if by chance somehow this would get turned into a movie, who would you cast to play the lead role of Jess Delgado?
America Ferrara is somebody I think would be great. She just has such a presence. Her acting chops are fantastic. Loved her in Barbie. She's just always been fantastic. So in the back of my mind, I always had her in mind for the role. If you're listening out there, if her agent,
Yeah, we have to put that out in the ether. I was thinking her too for this. Honestly, so when you said that, I was like,
yeah, perfect pick. Perfect pick.
oh my God, yeah.
yeah,
And
she'd kill it.
oh yeah. I think this book should be made into a movie, honestly. It really carries itself with that big Hollywood feel, but it doesn't take away from the comic creativity with it. And
Yeah.
especially with how things are left off, and I don't want to spoil the ending because I want everybody out there who's either watching or listening to go get this book. Are we thinking possibly is this the end of Jess's story, or is there a chance we might revisit this world?
I do have a sequel kicking around in the back of my head if this does well.
Excellent.
And yeah, I would love to explore the history and the true nature of the creatures in the book, and it does leave it open, so there's a possibility of a sequel. And speaking of the movie, like I said, I originally had this idea as a movie. But then switched over because I really wanted to explore it without, when you do a movie, you've got 20 different people telling you how it should be. And I really just wanted to explore this as a pure horror piece that I could concentrate on making it how I wanted to make it. And again, I love comics, and I really wanted to get into the world of graphic novels, so this seemed like the perfect thing to do. In success, hopefully, this will end up circling back around and being a movie.
Absolutely. And I mean, the draw is definitely there. And especially in these days, lots of horror is very successful. And of course, perfect timing to have this conversation, even because we're on the precipice of Alien Romulus coming out, which of course, when you talk about creatures in a movie, the Alien movies are second to none, and we'll see, you know, how that goes over with Fede Alvarez, of course, directing there.
Yeah.
Knowing that you have an idea kicking around is awesome. Is there anything else that you can share with us on the horizon? Are you going to dip into more comic book writing, or is there something else that you've got your eye on currently in the process?
Many, many things. I have a second graphic novel coming out either at the end of the year or early next year through Humanoids called Hard Bargain.
Okay.
That's a 1940s two-fisted private detective story where he gets involved in strange cases. I also, besides horror, I grew up loving those film noir detective stories. Murder My Sweet, The Maltese Falcon, anything by Raymond Chandler. So I had always wanted to do something in that arena, and Humanoids gave me the chance. I pitched them a story. They really liked it. So that'll be coming out. On the TV side, I've got the sequel to or spinoff to Spartacus coming out next year called The House of Asher. We're currently filming that in New Zealand. And hopefully you'll see me back in movies soon. I've got a Western I'm about to go out with. That's the other genre I've always wanted to do. Everything goes back to me growing up as a kid. And when I was a kid in the 70s, I saw all the Sergio Leone spaghetti westerns at the drive-in with my dad. And I had always wanted to do something in that arena, a really entertaining spaghetti western.
Oh man.
So far, you're hitting like all of my interests. So
Yeah, same.
I'm a big fan because I've also grew up. You know, my mom's a big Western fan. My father-in-law is a big Western fan. So I love Westerns, and I do love the old crime stories. So I'll definitely be looking out for that book as well. But wow, lots of great things coming out.
Yeah, and I mean, before we let you go, I mean, obviously you're dipping into the comics. Is there any character that is your dream character to work on, and why?
Oh man, I've already hit a few. I always wanted to do Conan. I always wanted to do Wolverine. It was great getting to do those. Of course, Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man in the comics. Um, I gotta tell you, I think I've hit the ones that were my big ones. The two big ones were Conan and Wolverine. And I feel very fortunate. I got a chance to work on those with Marvel.
I will say this after reading Beneath, I know Marvel's been dipping into the Predator catalog. I'd actually like to see you write a Predator comic just because I feel like that would be kind of, you know, in a realm that you could actually mix the message in a message in. You could even change it up. And on top of that, I mean, it is the Predator.
Oh yeah, I mean Jesus. I remember I saw Predator when I was in college in Santa Cruz in the 80s. And me and my buddy were downtown and decided to just catch a flick. We went into Predator, didn't know anything about it except it was Arnold Schwarzenegger in some kind of military movie. So we didn't even know it was science fiction. We didn't know there was a creature in it, which was the best way to see that movie. We were just blown away. Words. Wait a minute, there's an alien creature in this movie? We thought it was like Commando.
Yeah, it's crazy. If you didn't know going in, that's even better. Because if I would have not known going in, I'd have been like, wait a minute, like this is amazing. Like all of a sudden, you
Oh,
have.
yeah. It was like one of the best viewing experiences I've ever had.
Well, before we let you go, it is always we always like to give one final sell. So, what would you say to anybody who hasn't read Beneath yet, and why should they go and grab that from Comixology and the trade paperback that'll come out eventually as well?
Well, if you haven't read Beneath yet, you got to go read it. If you're a fan of horror, if you love Stephen King, John Carpenter, that kind of stuff, I think you're going to really enjoy this graphic novel.
Yeah, I will second all of that as somebody who read it and was a big fan.
I will third that. In fact, now that you threw that whole Predator talk in there, I need to see Predator versus Jess Delgado. I need to see this. Like, I'm now putting this out into the universe because when you read this, you are going to get such a multi-layered story that really transcends so many themes. There really isn't anything like this in horror right now that tackles so many issues and really gives you such a satisfying story, especially with the ending, which I can't even get into on here because I don't want to spoil it. Even though the book is out right now, I could go deep dive if I want to, but I want you, wherever you're watching, wherever you're listening, to go get this book because it is that good that we need to push for more of the Beneath universe. And we definitely need to see more of Steven DeKnight's writing in this. So, Steven, thank you again for coming on the show. We have the links for the liner notes, how everybody can go get Beneath, and how to get a hold of you on Twitter/X. So definitely thank you for coming again on the show.
Oh, thanks so much, guys. This has been a real blast.
Absolutely. And on behalf of Rich and myself, we'll end it like we always do on Turn a Page, but with a little twist this time. Because when you're at the comic shop and you see somebody struggling to go find something, hand your tablet or phone off. Because trust me, it might sound a little sketchy this time, but no, the book is well worth it. Because if you got a great issue in your hand like Beneath, you want to hand it off to him and tell him turn a page. We'll see you next time.